Number 2, look at Isaiah 42, the next chapter. Got to turn the page in my Bible, starting in verse 5. Because I wrote in my Bible, only God accurately knows the future. That's the first point of verse 23 of chapter 41. Number 2, prophecy proves God is real. Remember, no world religion has prophecy. I was on a train once, riding from what's the cap? Madrid to Malaga in Spain. It was a 24-hour train ride across Spain. And I was in a car, and it was me and 18 Muslims. And I was reading my Bible. And they were all in the car. And they were carrying on and everything. And finally we got into a big discussion. They spoke English. And they said, prove your God is real. Isn't that great? Being a train for 24 hours with 18 Muslims and me alone. Well, God was with me. So I guess it was a majority in the car. But here we were. And they said, prove to me your God is real. Do you know what one avenue would be? Instead of arguing with them about whether the Jews are good or bad or God's people or whatever, just do this. Look what it says in verse 5 of chapter 42. And this is what I tried to share with them. By the way, they got very bored and they said they weren't interested after a while. If you really tell them the truth, most people don't want to hear the truth. They just want to argue. And if you don't argue and just tell them truth, they get bored. But listen to verse 5, Isaiah 42:5. Thus says God the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out? Who spread forth the earth, that which comes from it? Who gives breath to the people on it and spirit to those on it? Who? Verse 6. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I'm the one that did all this, and I'll hold your hand. I will keep you. I will give you as a covenant to the people, a light to the Gentiles, to open blind eyes. Verse 7. To bring prisoners from prison, those who sit in darkness from the prison house. I am the Lord, verse 8, and my glory I will not give to another. But keep reading in verse 9. How does he identify who he is? Verse 9 of Isaiah 42. Behold, the former things have come to pass. He said, the prophetic scriptures I've given you prior to this has already happened. And new things I declare, look at the end of verse 9, before they spring forth, I tell you of them. God said, here's my calling card. You go to a convention, men pass out and women pass out their business cards. It's how you can identify who they are, and you can contact them. You can put them in your little reader and upload them to your computer, and you can be in touch with them. God says, you know what my calling card is? Do you know how you know who I am? Do you know what my ID is? Prophecy. He said here, this is how you know me. Verse 9. Before things spring forth, I tell you about them. God says, I tell you what's going to pop out in the future. And when I tell you what's going to pop out in the future, before it pops out, when it pops out, you know who I am. Prophecy, secondly, proves God is real. Look at verse 9 of chapter 46. So go over a few more chapters. Here's a third point. If you're writing this down, Isaiah 41 says, only God knows the future. Nobody else knows the future. No world religion, no horoscopic, necromancing witches know the future. They can just guess. Prophecy proves God is real. It's his calling card. But look at Isaiah 46, verse 9. The Lord says this, remember the former things of old, for I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me. Verse 10. Here it is again. He's hammering this idea of prophecy. Declaring the end from the beginning. You know how long God's been giving us prophecy? The book of Jude, that's the second to the last book of the New Testament. The book of Jude says that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, so we're back in Genesis 5, Jude says Enoch was declaring that the Lord is coming with 10,000s of his saints with him. 10,000. So Enoch, while he was walking with God, was telling the world that there was a future event when God, the Creator, was going to come back to the earth, bringing with him 10,000s of his saints. The second coming of Christ to this earth. God says, look at this, verse 10, declaring the end from the beginning, from ancient times, way back in Genesis, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Prophecy is God telling us what he wants to do, and doing it to show us he's God. It's the most amazing thing. God says, I have all the nations, and they're all on this board, and I am moving them at my bidding to do my will, and they think, like Adolf Hitler thought, he was starting the Third Reich, and he was going to start the 1,000-year rule of the Aryan people, and he was going to wipe out the Jewish people. And he decided he would do this Holocaust. And he did all that, and what God was doing was he was using that to fulfill prophecy. You ought to read sometime Leviticus, the last 2 chapters. Everything that happened to the Jewish people was written down there, point by point by point. Psalm 102 is very similar, talking about the Jewish people. Everything that God said is going to happen, Hitler fulfilled. And then, just before he got to the goal of getting rid of all the Jews, God got rid of him. And the nation of Israel was born. Really as a byproduct of Hitler's Holocaust. The whole world felt so bad. Do you know who voted for Israel's statehood? Russia. Russia's the one that put it through the UN. Russia thought it was going to be a communist nation because they had communes, collective, the kibbutz of Israel. Russia thought it was communist. So Russia ramrodded Israel through the UN in 1948 and said, make them a nation. Everybody else was debating. And Russia said, make them a nation. And it became the fulfillment of prophecy. God said 2,600 years before, there's going to be a national entity. There's going to be a scepter. There's going to be a political group called Israel. There was not a political entity called Israel since 586 BC. 2,600 years went by. God says, look at verse 10 of chapter 46. I declare the end from the beginning. God said 2,600 years ago what's going to happen at the end times. The ancient times I tell things that are not yet done, saying my counsel shall stand.